Welcome to the Become Who You Are podcast, a production of the John Paul II Renewal Center. I'm Jack Riggert, your host. Thanks for joining us today. I'm excited and grateful to have Jason Jones on the show today, all the way from Hawaii. Jason's a film producer, author, activist, popular podcast host, and human rights worker. He's the president of the Human Rights Education and Relief Organization, HERO, known for its two main programs, the Vulnerable Peoples Project and Movie to Movement. An executive producer of Bella. That's one of my favorite movies of all time. Pro-life, uplifting. If you haven't seen Bella, you're behind the eight ball. Bella won several film industry awards, most notably the People's Choice Award in 2006 in the Toronto International Film Festival. His tireless work for the pro-life movement was just recognized in a featured chapter in The Legacy of Life, a book honoring 50 of the greatest pro-life leaders of the last 50 years. At the heart of everything he does is a mission to stand between the violent and the vulnerable, from the child in the womb to Christians in Nigeria, civilians in Ukraine, to our former allies in Afghanistan. Jason, it's really a pleasure to have you on the show. Welcome.
Jack, thanks for having me on your show.
Well, I'll just add this, the John Paul II Renewal Center, Jason, is located in Illinois. So we're in the belly of the beast here. With all the pro-life work that you do, we're just radically pro-abortion here. And if those young children, Jason, you'll appreciate this, I'm sure that you're up on this, but if they're fortunate enough to make it through their mother's womb, we've got the gender ideologies rendering them sterile with puberty blockers, the cross-sex hormones, literally mutilating their bodies, these poor young kids, and we're pushing this stuff. I just got banned from a local library for speaking out on pornography in schools for fourth and fifth graders. It's amazing. So I want to talk about your book so much, this great campaign against the Great Reset coming up. But before we do, I just want to back up a little bit, give you a chance to talk about Divided Hearts of America, available on Amazon Prime right now. Incredible movie. And then also the Vulnerable Peoples Project. For people that don't know you, Jason, I'd love to have you talk just a little about what you do. You're doing some really frontline, dangerous stuff. I've been following you for years, and you've got some courage, Jason. God bless you, and God bless you for the work you're doing. So you come in where you want to and maybe touch on those and anything else that's on your mind before we hit that book.
Sure, Jack. Well, first of all, I'm not a very courageous person. What I do, though, is I lack the ability to anticipate consequences, which in my work, that's
yes,
like a little kid that doesn't know till he gets hurt that he shouldn't do things. But I'm actually from Illinois.
You are
from the south suburbs. I was raised in Homewood, Country Club Hills,
yeah, sure.
tireless. In fact, Divided Hearts of America is a documentary I did with Benjamin Watson, former standout tight end for the New England Patriots. And I was raised in a community in Country Club Hills called Provincetown. And it's sort of the stand lot where we played football. Benjamin Watson and I, while we were shooting the movie, we went and we played catch. So,
what a riot! That's beautiful.
That was, you always have to give yourself these little Easter eggs, right? These little,
yes.
So, for me, my whole journey started in Palos Hills in 1988. I went to Amos Alonzo Stagg High School, and was on the football team. Day after a homecoming game, actually. On a Saturday morning, my high school girlfriend rode her bicycle to my house, and came into my room and woke me up with the words, "I'm pregnant." So that we conspired to, keep the baby, and I would join the Army so I could provide for a child. And on my 17th birthday, I actually went to the recruiter's office and joined the Army. It's just a couple of weeks after my 17th birthday. I was on my way to Fort Benning, Georgia. While I was in Fort Benning, Georgia, just a few weeks before graduating and coming home on a Sunday morning, I received a call from my high school girlfriend that her father beat her up and took her to get a forced third trimester abortion. I never went to school. I never went to church a day in my life. This is the age before cable news. My family didn't talk politics. I didn't know in our country it was legal to destroy a child in the womb until I found out that my child was destroyed in the third trimester. In fact, I had begged my commanding officer, my company commander, to call the police. And he had to sit me down and say, "What are you talking about? Why would we call the police?" Um, that was sort of the inciting incident that really woke me up to violence against children. And that was the birth of my passion, to get between the violent and the vulnerable. I was an infantryman, and it was sort of, to me, my work always was, threats to the innocent and the vulnerable, from the child in the womb to children after they're born. It's just a continuity. A child is a child. So our work at my organization, Hero Inc., with our two programs, VPP, the Vulnerable People Project, and Movie to Movement, you'll see a thread, and that the thread that links us together is direct violent attacks on innocent human people, from the child in the womb to the Uyghur in concentration camps that are having their organs harvested in Chinese occupied East Turkestan. So if you look at my work, and it doesn't make sense to a lot of people, I think I'm all over the place, and I say, no, I'm not at all. I've never been. I've been very focused. We do one thing two ways here at my organization. We protect the vulnerable from violence, and we do that by promoting human dignity and inspiring solidarity. That hence the movies are a great way to promulgate the truth about the human person. And even our actions, like we're the last organization that we know of, American organization, rescuing and resettling and hiding our Afghan allies, that were left in the wake of the Biden's disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan. Even in the work that we do, that is a work of mercy, but at the heart of what we're wanting to do is exemplify the dignity of these people and our responsibility to keep promises to those Afghan allies who we promised, the United States government made promises to and then abandoned. So yeah, that's what we do.
You
And
know, Jason, when you talk about human dignity, and then solidarity, we've really lost that, haven't we? I mean, when you think about those things, I want people listening just to really sit on what you're saying there, to see the individual human being now. It's we've lost sight of that. I even speaking to young people now, they're so mixed up. Their hearts are so mixed up. They have a hard time seeing the truth, seeing what it means to be a human being, seeing the freedom that's innate within us that we're giving away. We're being enslaved to these ideologies, being enslaved to sin. I think, when we're taking the life of young people in the womb, but also these gender ideologies, and like you said, even in war, that we could pull out of, say, Afghanistan with no thought behind of those human beings and the human destruction, not only of the individual adults, but they're married, they have families, they have, it's amazing devastation, isn't it?
yeah, I know that this is an audio only podcast, correct?
Well, I can put up some clips if you're okay with
Well,
it.
I know I want to show you something while we're
Yes.
talking that I don't want to go on the air, but I want to show it to you now. I'm glad you brought that idea of families. I think the reason why, Catholic social teaching, when honestly deployed, is the greatest architecture of protection for the vulnerable. The problem is, in the Catholic Church, we've seen what I call victimism. In my book, the Great Campaign Against the Great Reset, one of the 5 ideologies of evil that are part of this Great Reset is victimism, feigning concern for the vulnerable for wealth, power, and prestige. We have seen in the Catholic Church through techniques, strategies like the seamless garment that sought to compare the child in the womb or submerge the child in the womb in an ocean full of prudential issues. So I remember growing up, in the 80s, even though I wasn't Catholic, I would hear this expression a lot, seamless garment, from Cardinal Bernardine and from Catholics. And then I came to understand after the abortion, they would submerge the child in the womb in like an ocean of prudential issues, when, the direct threats of violence to the vulnerable, is not like incommensurate to whether or not you think minimum wage should be $12 or $15. It's not like incommensurate to your positions in immigration. Usually, I mean, there are times where you could, and I would even argue that opposing border security is actually abandoning the vulnerable to law and order and protection from the dangerous underground economy. But I think so the misapplication or the abuse or misuse intentionally for wealth or power or to evade public censure or to gain acclaim um, has weakened even the idea of Catholic social teaching amongst Catholics. And I'm so glad that you brought up, your battle with pornography in um, your local school library. The moral imagination of our young people has been absolutely and utterly obliterated by
Mm.
pornography. Their moral imagination is being destroyed by TikTok and YouTube Reels and Facebook and Instagram Reels. Like they're just becoming addicted. Humans learn through mimesis. We learn through watching other people. We learn what to value. We learn what's important. And just scroll on your phone through any of these social media apps and imagine the young, fresh, impressionable minds of young people. What are they learning? What are they learning through mimesis on what is important? And it's utterly catastrophic. The obliteration of the idea of gender um, is devastating. And that's why in my book, The Great Campaign Against the Great Reset, my first chapter is an introduction to young Americans, where I lay out very briefly for them the path to defeating the Great Reset for them personally is very simple. Not easy, but simple. Love God, love your parents, preserve your moral imagination so that you can properly experience erotic love within the sacrament of marriage. Create life, love and protect your children, and with your wife and your family, order your actions to the good of our posterity. This is how you beat, if you look at everything the Great Reset is seeking to do, it is to break down the relationship between us and God, ourselves and our parents. And really strikingly, it's damaging the ability of young people to even experience or even intellectually understand what eros is, erotic
Yeah.
love is. And that eros, that love that takes place between a man and a woman in the sacrament of marriage is the bond that holds society together. And when young people really can't even begin to intellectually understand what eros is, this is robbing them of not only their intellect but of their heart, and it's very damaging. And so I'm glad you brought that up. And this is the great struggle. And we can't look anywhere but the Catholic Church for the answer to this. That's the reality. There's nowhere else. If not the Blessed Virgin Mary, who would there have been? If not for St. Peter, if St. Peter would have not come back, who would have? And if we as lay Catholics today, part of the mystical body of Christ, are not light, if we're not salt, if we're not having the courage that you had to go down, and it's not a comfortable thing to want to talk about sex and sexuality to public library, God forbid. That's why we're there, because we don't want those conversations being had
Yeah.
in a vulgar way. But if not for you doing that, who would have done that? So the
Jason, when you wrote this book and you start out with right off the bat with young people, did you write it with them in mind? I mean, is the book? I mean, if a young when you say young people, what age were you thinking about with that? And I'll tell you why. I think it's injustice what's going on in the world today. The way everything you just described, the way young people are being twisted and distorted. I really think it's an injustice. It is an injustice, and promulgated a lot of times by parents, by relatives, by all of us giving into these in parishes, Catholic churches that aren't. It's not easy for me to get into to talk about theology of the body into Catholic parishes and bring this in. It's amazing pushback you get all over. I think that we almost have to go beneath the culture and really put something together that appeals to the young people to talk about exactly what you do, because they're starting to understand that they're missing something. Not all of them, but if we can wake up some of them to what you said, this eros, we've reduced love down to a feeling, down to romance, and then we further reduced it down to sex. They're not finding what they're looking for, Jason. And so getting back to your book again, look, at I know there's a lot of meat in what you wrote here, and but at the end of the day, did you have these young people in mind? Is that why you started this way?
Yes. I think when we think of the Great Reset, first of all, a lot of the books are pessimistic. It's sort of like this is what's coming for us, you know.
Yep.
Chesterton's The Ballad of the White Horse, you know. You
Hmm.
get a lot of this. I tell you not for your comfort, nay, not for your desire. The clouds grow darker yet, and the sea rises higher. But we leave the second part out of it, which is that we have wars we hardly win and souls we hardly save. When Chesterton says that, if you hardly win a war, you hardly save a soul. What have you done? You've won a war and you've saved a soul. And
Hmm.
so I wanted to write a book that was honest, had a an honest assessment of the challenges that we are all facing. I wanted to look at it through a theological and philosophical lens, and I wanted to write for young people specifically um, because I wanted them to be hopeful. And as I say in the book, you know, when you read this book, I don't want you to look at it as the end of a pleasant life, um, but I want you to see it as the beginning of your great adventure, this adventure
Hmm.
of Eros, that it
Yeah.
is going to be a great adventure. But adventures are not, you know, necessarily the most pleasant things. As you know, when you read The Hobbit or The Lord of the
Hmm.
Rings. I remember as a child, I loved The Hobbit. Yeah, I read The Hobbit 100 times. I would try to read Lord of the Rings, and it was so eerie and scary. And Tolkien called The
Mm.
Hobbit a there and back again story. It was and it, you know, about a journey. But The Lord of the Rings was a quest. He said, you come back from a journey sort of refreshed and invigorated, but you never come back from this quest. And if you do, you're diminished in a way. You're made thin. Remember, Frodo says, I feel so thin. Um, and for those of us, or another great film on William Wilberforce, Amazing Grace, you can see that adventure of working to abolish slavery in the United Kingdom took its toll on William Wilberforce. Uh,
Hmm.
he was such a young man filled with passion and hope, and he achieved those hopes. But it came at a cost. And this great adventure, this adventure of Eros, is not going to be easy. You have young people who they use this expression body count to say how many people they've slept with,
Yeah.
and they it's like a competition as they get older and they seek to be married. When they have already recognized there's all these, in all of these, like um on social media, they're always amongst themselves talking about their inability to quote unquote pair bond. So they're recognizing that they've been lied to. And so another great threat that we're going to see in generation Z and alpha is an attraction to virulent, violent ideologies that may seem that will come from the right. So, as a conservative, this is something that should frighten us. We saw this in Europe in the 1930s as a reaction to the Bolsheviks and to the revolution, into the civil war in Spain. You saw a rise in young people being attracted in the collapse of Germany and the decadence and perversion of the Weimar Republic. We saw young people being attracted to National Socialism. So we're already kind of starting to see this.
Oh, we're starting to see it in a big way, and unfortunately, everything that you say there, when we're speaking to young men, look at this is going to go one of two ways, right? You were talking about the adventure. I think it was John Eldridge and probably Wilde of Heart had that famous line in there where he said, you know, that's three core things about a man. It's going to be an adventure. We want this as an adventure. It's going to be a battle. We know as kids, right? As young boys. I mean, whoever went outside their house when they were young boys without a weapon, you know, without a plastic sword or you know, we knew it was going to be a battle. And then the last thing is beauty. It's for beauty. It's for eros. It's for love. It's going to go if we don't challenge them and crack this open for them. Then you're going to lose them to the socialists. You're going to lose them to some adventure that's going to take them down the wrong path. And this is becoming very clear. I mean, the work that you're doing here is really important because if we don't clarify this and at least give young people a chance to see there's another side to this, right? There's another side to this adventure. There's another side to this battle. It's the battle to uphold the beauty and love of a woman. And what young girl didn't dress like a princess when she was young, Jason? I mean, they all dress. I've got daughters, and I've also got 7 grandkids. 6 of them are girls. They all dress in these princesses. They all are looking for that knight in shining armor. So this is innate within us, but nobody's telling these stories. Nobody's telling the story.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And we as Catholics have to be very honest. Like, I'm an adult convert. Is even when I was a young man, um, in the army and then in college when I was exploring religion, I found Catholicism repulsive.
Mm,
The reason I found it repulsive was because the Catholics that I would meet, or when I went to the Newman Center, they were trying to feed me soupy oatmeal. They weren't
yeah,
giving me the
yeah,
faith.
yeah,
Young men and
yeah,
young women they wanted adventure. That's why you see the trends. They're doing ice baths, ice plunges. This is why Exodus 90 is such a sensation. Like, you look at it, you're like, guys, can you take out the cold showers? No,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
works because
Hmm.
people want to be pushed. They want to be challenged. Well, young people, they're not going to have a choice. Like, sadly, I'm Gen X. Like, we're probably the luckiest generation in the history of the world. Like, we were born between eruptions of chaos on every side, and we had a little glimpse of tranquility in the midst of it, a little glimpse of sanity between the baby boomers and what young people today are facing. Um, but yeah, they're having a great challenge, and so they need to understand it's going to be a challenge. Being in love, having a family, trusting each other is going to be a great challenge. So then when we think about what is the Great Reset, we think about Klaus Schwab. You're going to be eating crickets and liking it. You're going to live in these smart cities where you're being surveilled, you're being monitored, you can be debanked if you tweet something they don't like. Like, this is what we fear, and this is the reality, and we should fear this. But what's even more important is the ability to love God, love your parents, love your spouse, love your children. This is at the heart of what the Great Reset will obliterate. I think it's in Casablanca where
Mm,
Rick says, "Would you rather be in love at war or loveless in a time of peace?" Something like that.
mm,
And we're going to have a generation of young people who will really not know. And our generation can't even begin to understand it, to be honest, because the pornography for us, um, Jack, our pornography was the Sears catalog, right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
we cannot even begin to wrap our mind around what it's like when you're, 14 and a boy and you're like looking at the Sears underwear section, um, and to being like 9 and having the most unbelievable pornography pouring through your phone before you're even hitting puberty. And these young people are looking at it just out of curiosity. What is it that these mammals do that we're related to so closely? And they look at this and it just begins to unravel everything. Um, and it just breaks their heart's ability to love. And so this is the adventure. It's the adventure of Eros. But what a great adventure. All generations have had challenges: totalitarianism, war, uh, uh, pandemics, childhood diseases that just would wipe out generations of children in the past. The immigrant crisis in the United States. There was a time, I think, upwards of 20 or 30% in the middle to late 19th century of Irish girls were trapped in the sex industry and prostitution in the United States.
Mm.
Imagine what it was like for our great grandparents or great 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 grandparents who were immigrants coming from Ireland, from Italy, wherever they were coming from, in poverty, um, what they had to suffer, the challenges that they had to face. Every generation has challenges. These are very unique, they're very new, but they're surmountable. And our faith tells us, like, we're priest, prophet, king. Like, we have all that we need. We have grace. So that's why I wrote this book, because I want young people to look at this challenge rightly, and not to despair, not to become despondent, not to give up.
Yeah. So talk about a couple practical ways to strengthen families and communities through, sometimes I'll lay out Catholic social teaching just to get a framework here, and you can fill it in a little bit depending on how you want. But I think of it as a triangle, like a two-dimensional triangle, like a pyramid in front of you, and on the bottom, holding this whole thing up, is marriage and the family, of course, and Christ and the church. And then culture comes on top of that, and then polity, right? And but nothing happens, Jason, in politics, and nothing's going to happen in culture until the human heart has been transformed. And that's going to take place in the family and in Christ in the church. And the power of that. When I talk to young guys that I work with that are addicted to porn, and this is hardcore porn, as you described, it changes their minds, it changes the rewiring in their brain. They can't even talk to a girl because they can't look her in the eye, Jason. You know all these things. And at the end, Catholicism offers through the sacraments and through prayer that hope, right? That, I always tell young guys, don't push this down, don't suppress all of this, and don't indulge, right? They get in that cycle of trying to be good, trying to push it down, and then indulging. And it's this third way, right? This third way where I open up my heart. In fact, I can use my temptation now as an invitation to prayer. This is powerful stuff, Jason. And the work that you have done in the past. Look, and I couldn't read this book because it's not out for a little while yet. We're hopefully we get you some pre-orders here, and we get some pre-orders in for it. But talk about some
And it's
practical
on
ways.
Amazon. We've had 50,000 some pre-orders already.
Oh,
so
nice. Well,
we're really
congratulations.
Yeah. So
You should be excited. And this is the perfect thing that you're talking about to bring hope right now into a kind of a glum situation for sure that we're facing. There's no easy way to turn this around.
Apparently, it seems glum, but I would say that it's not glum. When I kind of was trying to wrap my mind, I wrote this book, and I look at like the ideologies that are part of the Great Reset: victimism, Gnosticism, transhumanism, anti-humanism, the climate cult. And
All those things. So we could do a show on each one of those things. So I'm gonna try not to interrupt you, but I want you to go through some of those main points that you want our listeners to remember as they go back into this book to glean more information. I mean, they're getting hammered by a lot of lies, right? A lot of
and it's about to get rough.
And we haven't even talked about vaccines yet, or COVID, or X coming out, right? Some kind of disease X now they're talking about at the World Economic Forum. So I'm going to throw it in your lap, and you talk about how you unpack this in the book.
Jack, it sounds like an adventure to me. So yeah, when that's how we have to look at this. And when I was trying to wrap my mind around the struggle that this generation is going to have, I realized that they had to understand it as an adventure. And so let me start with one ideology, which I would call the centerpiece of, and I love that this is a Catholic show, so I can speak in a way more directly that I wouldn't on most shows. The Great Campaign versus the Great Reset. The Great Campaign comes from Evangelium Vitae from St. John Paul the Great. The Great Campaign is just another word for the mystical body of Christ. So, and the Great Reset is the Antichrist, the body of the Antichrist. So this is really the battle of the mystical body of Christ versus the mystical body of Antichrist. And something very big happened, obviously, when the second person of the Trinity became man. In Ecclesiastes 4:1, Solomon says, I looked all over the world and all I see is suffering and oppression. And on the side of the oppressor is power. And on the side of the oppressed is no one. Okay. So that was true when Solomon said that, but it's not true anymore. You can't read that and go, oh, that's true, because I can look all over the world and see oppression. And on the side of the CCP with the Uyghur is Disney and Google and Meta and the New York Times. And on the side of the oppressed is the mystical body of Christ. So we have the mystical body of Christ. That's us. So nothing is that dark. Nothing can ever be that dark again, as when Solomon looked all over the world and said that. Things have been changed. Things have been changed forever. So I want to talk about two core principles: one of Catholic social teaching and one of this mystical body of the Antichrist, the Great Reset. That's solidarity versus victimism. Victimism to me is the ideology of the Antichrist. It is feigning concern for the vulnerable, for wealth, power, and prestige. It empties the gospel of all meaning. I'm going to be the defender of affluent German homosexual men. I'll become the greatest defender. Okay, really. Really, how much courage does that take? None. So they put themselves up as great defender. By the way, there is a way to defend men with same-sex attraction, right? Courageously, that comes with a cost, which is to order our language thoughtfully to to lead them to salvation and truth about sexuality. To do that would come at a great cost. There's a way that we can speak about human rights or human dignity, which actually abandons those words of any meaning. That's victimism. And victimism is you can think of Black Lives Matter and Antifa, these types of enthusiasms and these movements. The climate cult is the worst one. Green cars, I'm going to say something very controversial, but brutally honest. There's no such thing as a green car. What we call green energy is black and brown energy. It's black coal and African children who are digging for, the rare earth elements, the minerals that go into the batteries of your electric vehicle. This is victimism. You're feigning concern. King Charles, in his Christmas address, was the ultimate victimist speech. He said, we shouldn't allow famine and war and civil unrest to distract us from compassion for the climate. That is victimism. So what is authentic solidarity? Authentic solidarity, it takes risks, takes consequences. As the great Catholic anthropologist from Stanford, Rene Girard, wrote, to be in solidarity with the vulnerable is to become vulnerable, is to become indistinguishable from those who you love. To kiss a leper is to be treated like a leper. Yes? To stand next to a woman being stoned in adultery is likely to get you a rock in the head or nailed to a cross. And that's what we are called to do as Christians. To serve your local homeless comes with consequences. To play checkers at the old folks' home with gentlemen with dementia, all these things come with challenges. The work that my organization does, when people go, oh, I don't know why you're doing that. Isn't it dangerous? Well, I don't know how I can serve people in danger without being in danger. I don't know how you do that. I don't know how a fireman puts out a fire without risking dying in a fire. I don't know how police officers don't protect us from violence without being risk being victims of violence. I don't know how a Christian stands with the most vulnerable members of their community without saving some risk. For example, like you standing with the children at your local library got you kicked out of the library. That is authentic solidarity. Now, you could have dressed up as a woman and you could have went and read to those kids, and they would have called you a hero in the local paper that have probably named the wing of the library after you, right? That's victimism versus true solidarity. That is the heart of this great campaign against the Great Reset.
Yes. So, John Paul II, I could see him today, Jason, challenging young people that were hopeless, that were looking for something. John Paul would say, I'm an old man. You didn't come to see an old man. You came to see Jesus Christ. But he would say this to them, right? Young people, you know that your life has meaning to the extent that it's given away as a gift to others. They understood that, Jason. The two great commandments, it's not brain surgery. Open yourself up, receive love, receive divine love, and then pour that out in self-giving love. This is what marriage means. This is what authentic Catholic teaching is really all about, which you just unpacked. And at the end of the day, try it, because your life, it will find meaning and it will find purpose. Who am I? I'm a daughter or a son of God. And what's my meaning and purpose? To receive this divine life and love and give it away. And you'll never run out, because you're always going to the fountain. You're always going to the fountain. You're always going to the spring that's overflowing in your heart. This is where eros comes from. And Benedict would say, eros, you look up on the cross, that's Jesus is eros, giving himself away, but he's 100% agape love, right? So eros and divine love in one person, he pours that out to us so I can drink this in and be that person of love. And at the end of the day, young people, if we can find a way to tell them that story, Jason, and unpack it to, you're a storyteller, unpack that for people so they can understand it and see it. They know something's amiss. Not all of them, Jason, but I don't know how that works, right? With young people walking around protesting, against Israel right now. But on the other hand, you see a number of young people at Focus, 15,000 of them, not so far from us at a Focus ministry, and 15,000 of them praying together, you know, right? So all we can do is keep telling the story, and look at, not everybody's going to wake up. We know that, but I think we young people deserve, right? They deserve to hear the story, so they have a decision to make, right? If nobody tells them the story, I don't have a decision to make. I had a bunch of bad choices, and you have to do what you just said. You can't water this down. You have to tell them it's going to be an adventure. It's going to be a battle. But at the end of the day, listen to your heart, right? It's about beauty. It's about love. And I'm like I said, I'm excited about what you're writing and the work that you're doing.
Yeah, I want to address you mentioned the young people that are, they go into these protests. I think Chesterton said, not to butcher the quote, but I think Chesterton said to the effect of, every man who walks into a brothel is
Mm-hmm.
looking for love. And
Mm-hmm.
I would think that every young person, not the demagogues who are gaslighting the young people for power, but the young people that participate, whether it's Antifa or BLM or any of these causes, they're wanting to express love for their community. Even with the mask, I called the mask like it was the secular scapular.
Mm-hmm.
For many people, it became a symbol of
Mm-hmm.
thoughtfulness to the community. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I recognized right away that I had to fight these mandates and these masks because they were not good for our health, and they were undermining the health, and they were undermining the community. But the challenge is the very people you're battling are battling you because they so much want to stand in solidarity with their community and say to their neighbors,
Mm-hmm.
"Look, I love you." And then they make us the villain. Like, we love you, we'll protect you from these villains. And meanwhile, we're in the position where we're like, we love you too. And you're not a villain, but boy, are you mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where the church really, this is where we need to step up. Because if we don't give people real food, they're going to take junk food. And social justice junk food is destroying this country, and it's destroying young people.
And the key is really with the laity
Yeah.
right now, Jason. I mean, you look around. Bishop Sheen was big on this. John Paul understood this well too. He always just challenging the laity. Bishop Sheen always said, you have to make sure that your bishops act like bishops, your priests act like priests, your religious act like religious. We have to do this now. We have to stand up. There was a time when I was a young boy going to the Latin Mass. I'm a little older than you, and at the you kind of left everything to the priest. But today we can't do that anymore, Jason. So this is a good time for you and I and everybody listening here, because the solution is, well, you were talking about G.K. Chesterton and C.S. Lewis. GK would say, "I am." What's the solution, right? Remember, right? He was writing. They wrote what's
What's the
wrong with
problem with the world?
Christianity?
They
Yeah,
asked Chesterton,
and
what's
with
wrong with the
yeah,
world? He wrote, I am.
I am, and that's what
Yeah.
we have to say. We have to say, "I am." So as we wind down here, what else? What else did you want to bring out with the book? Because you hit on so many things that the right to private property. You could see them, right? You will own nothing, and all of these things, and you'll be
Will own
happy,
nothing and be happy. Notice they said, you will own nothing.
and you will
Not
be
we will own nothing. You.
happy.
You will eat cricket meat. Now we will eat
Yeah.
cricket meat. You will eat
Yes.
cricket meat. It's unbelievable. Let me tell you. So maybe I'll give you we'll end on this.
Okay.
It's because it's not on a lot of people's radar right now, but boy, should it be. It's transhumanism.
Mm-hmm.
Transhumanism. I
Mm-hmm.
just finished by C.S. Lewis yesterday, and I was so taken by it, is his book Out of the Silent Planet,
Mm-hmm.
part of the space trilogy, and I'm about done. I'll finish it this evening, his Paralandra, which is strikingly, breathtakingly beautiful. But he talks about transhumanism there, and he started
He
writing
does.
it in the mid 30s, I think is when he started writing it, finished it in the midst of World War II, but the series. But transhumanism, it's in Paralandra where an angel is disputing with this professor who's effectively a transhumanist, saying, what is it that you're fighting for? And he says, by your definition of what a human is, it will no longer be a human at all. And I thought, wow, this is really touching on what transhumanism is. You can listen to these advocates, of transhumanist technology, and like Yuval Harari, these who wrote
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, the sort of what has become the Bible of the transhumanists. They really see an end to the Homo sapien, and they believe that what we call transhuman won't even be human. And the radical interaction of technology with biology and what it means to be a human person and the obliteration of free will, the massive um, uh, the lifespan of the wealthy will be stretched beyond what's unimaginable today. And also the quality of life will be stretched. So the wealthy will no longer, or powerful will no longer look to their posterity or the common good, but everything will be about what can I do to live a little longer? What can I do to stretch my quality of life a little bit further? And then, sort of like I said to my wife, what's really amazing is, of course, these technologies are going to be very tempting, but what's sort of a grace and sort of miraculous is all of these technologies are at the heart of them involve the destruction of innocent human life.
Yeah.
You can look at embryonic stem cell research or China's forced organ harvesting of the Uyghur population. So it sort of protects us from this temptation. Those of us are grounded in a respect for human dignity. I remember um, Bishop Vigano, Archbishop Vigano, or no, it was Athanasius Schneider. He called the vaccine sort of a baptism into the mystical body of Antichrist. So
Mhm.
there are these real concerns with transhumanism. And the greatest concern is the obliteration of thoughtfulness to the common good and the obliteration of the thoughtfulness to our posterity. Bill Gates, who is one of the biggest advocates of transhumanism and also the biggest advocate of population control, has said that they're interconnected, that we won't need to procreate as a species to continue. We will just continue, so we don't need to procreate. Also, people like Bill Gates see our posterity as competitors for resources, not with their posterity, but with them, because they believe they're going to have these massive lifespans. So I know to a lot of folks, this is probably like, wow, Jason, you jumped the shark with me there. These
Well,
tech.
no, you're not. I mean, you're the vision. If all you got to listen is Harari, you just can YouTube them, right? I mean, you can
Yeah,
listen to exactly what you're saying there, Jason. Well, I keep getting back to the accelerating pride that these people are, and the illusion that these people are under. You wonder how that could be. I mean, Bill Gates is probably somewhere around my age, maybe a couple of years older, maybe even a couple of years younger. He's going to be out of here in if he doesn't get hit by a bus or something, right? In 15, 20 years, 30 years, stretch it. And you know what? The end of the day is coming, and they're not going to stretch out their lives. Nobody has ever done it. My dad is 97 years old. He's an old World War II vet. He's still alive today. He hasn't done anything but exercise and eat right and drink good wine and maybe some good bourbon, right? At the end of the day, he's not, if he gets another couple of years out of an organ transplant from some Uyghur or some baby, and I live 3 or 4 more years. I mean, how despicable is this, right? I'm going to destroy life so I get a couple of more years left. But this is the illusion that they're under. They're going to put a chip in their brain, and so Jason, it's Genesis 3 all over again, right? You will be like
striking,
God's, and
striking.
but the last thing I'll just say is, and get your opinion on this. The weeds and the wheat are sticking up to me. They're in the church, they're in the government, they're our neighbors, this is a battle of the individual heart,
They're
like so
us.
they're
They're
us.
us. Look, it's
Yeah.
me. Then
Yeah.
my next book after this book coming out next year is my spiritual autobiography coming out from
Mm,
Sophia Press,
mm,
and the title is On Rocky Soil: the
mm.
spiritual body, a spiritual autobiography of a man you may not meet in heaven, and it's about working out my salvation in fear and trembling.
Yes, yes,
And
yes.
I tell you what, like, I fear and I tremble, and I can
Yeah.
feel all of these things tugging on me. I was an adult convert, so I know more than most of my generation probably about the adventure of Eros that young people have to battle. And I'm kind
Yeah.
of grateful for the empathy that has given me. So, yeah, I think all of us have to understand that the battle is running through all of our hearts. And I always tell my wife, if the world wasn't in such a dark place, I'd probably have moved above a bar in Costa Rica already and called.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would
Yeah.
have gotten a library card. And
Yeah.
um, Leo Strauss, the political philosopher, wrote that a good statesman loves his city more than his own soul, which would be quite sorrowful.
Mhm.
But I would say, as a Catholic, sometimes I think it's this idea that more than my soul is at risk, because I could be a scandal or I can be light in
Yeah.
the darkness. So we all have to be aware that there's a raging battle that is in all of our hearts, and it's the most important battle
The
for
most
us
important battle.
to win.
Yeah.
And the great campaign against the Great Reset, people say, when did the Great Reset began? I'm gonna say, well, when Eve took that apple, that's when it
Yeah.
began.
Yeah.
Uh, and so in many, many, many ways, it is nothing new, but in many, many ways, it's startlingly new, with all sorts of challenges and temptations. The biggest part isn't the cricket meet to me. The worst part of this coming challenges to young people and maybe us isn't the cricket meet and the taking our private property, but it's these sort of like Luciferian temptations
Hmm.
to longevity or quality of life, that are going to be presented to all of us. And it's only through God's grace that we won't be swept away. And hence why the sacraments are so important.
Yeah. Hey, God bless you, Jason. This has been just wonderful to have you. Look, I'm going to have some links in the show notes for the book. Where else? What other context do you want me to put in? Anything else? And what is your website if
My
people want
website
to
is
check it out?
thevulnerablepeopleproject.com, or the same place, thegreatcampaign.org, thegreatcampaign.org.
Okay.
And I have a podcast myself, The Jason Jones Show. You can go subscribe there and get the book. I promise. Um, Everyone who's read the book has been so moved, and the pre-orders have been startling. I've already pre-sold more copies of this book than I've sold of my last book that came out 10 years ago. So
Oh, I'm excited for you, and it's well deserved. And you're hitting it. You're hitting it right where we need to hear it. You and again, you say you don't have courage, but I know you're humble enough to say that. But the courage may not have been something you planned, but it's coming out of you. And thank you so much. You're not going to be able to retire, unfortunately, because we need your voice out there. So God bless you, Jason. Thank you so much, and we look forward to getting the book.
all right, thanks, Jack.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.